All right, welcome to Pop Culture. I'm happy today to be talking about Marxism. I hope to convert you all to communism. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about Marxism, but it's totally fine if you don't like it. I'm sure you've been sort of trained not to like it. Just read and think, and that's all I ask today. So as I said, we're going to talk about Karl Marx, Frederick Engels, and Antonio Gramsci. And these people, their reputation precedes them, let's say. I think it's an interesting experiment before we even get into any of this to think about a situation. I started doing this in my classes a few years ago because I realized there's so much baggage that we kind of just have to get over before we can really talk about any of the actual texts themselves. And that's what I want to do. I don't want to talk about how good or bad communism is or Marxism is because I find that that's a useless activity. I do want to talk about the ideas or the written words that some of these people said and why we think that they are powerful or not, or difficult or beautiful, the things that we've talked about earlier, right? You can look at things. It's pretty much impossible to be like, yeah, Marx is right or Marx is wrong. What you want to do is think, Marx and Engels make an interesting point here. Here's how I interpret it, right? Or this is really a beautiful sentiment, but I think it's problematic in this way, right? There's no yes or no. That said, the experiment I like to do, which you're welcome to do in real life, just please don't get me shot. Imagine you're at Thanksgiving dinner. You're around the house, right? You're maybe back with your parents, grandparents, uncles, whatever. And then you announce to them that you are really interested in converting to Marxism, or that you're really interested in Marxism. So for most of you, I doubt that this is ever going to be the case. But what would happen and what would be the result of that? I find that that's a really interesting thought experiment, because most people tell me that their parents would disown them, or that they'd get yelled at, or they get kicked out of the house, which I find interesting, right? For a number of reasons, but yeah, I mean, so like I said, you're welcome to do this. Like, I've had students in class text their dad and say, hey, I like Marxism, or my teacher has got me really thinking about how great Karl Marx is. Just please, at the end of all of that, just tell them that this was an experiment. I don't want any shotguns at my house saying you've converted my kid to a commie or something. But it is interesting to think, like, what are the reactions? Because I think typically what I've heard, which is somewhat surprising, but not anymore, is that their parents would disown them for being anti-religious. So Marx was known as not being religious himself, questioning religion and how it can work. And so the parents would be very upset that would mean that it's incompatible with loving Jesus, or with being a proper Muslim, or whatever the case, right? So some people are concerned about that. Others think that you would suddenly be in favor of putting people in gulags and punishing everybody, or they think that, you know, you'd have to share your clothes with everybody, and that it would be all a communal whatever. I don't know. It's really interesting, though, to see the stereotypes and the background, the implied meanings and values that Marx evokes, especially in America, because for most Americans, you've been taught from an early age that Marxism is evil, capitalism is the best thing we can do, and so it's understandable, right? If you were taught, to see something from the beginning as good or bad, then it's very hard for, 20 years later, somebody says like, hey, maybe it's not that bad, or whatever, maybe let's just think about it fresh. It's very hard to do that. But let's do that. And I want to do that by asking what a few things mean to you, or what you think they might mean, and trying to explain them a little bit. And of course, I have some questions, and I have some additional videos for you on the website. So one of the most famous sayings is that the ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. What does this mean? I think it's interesting, and it's actually, you take away the baggage and you take away the cultural assumptions, and it's very hard to disagree with this, although you're welcome to try. You're welcome to tell me why you don't think that's the case. But this is not saying that you're a Marxist or that you're a communist if you agree with this, but think about what this actual sentence means, right? The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. So let's think back. Let's not think about right now for a moment. And let's think back to, for example, ancient Egypt. So in ancient Egypt, right, the pharaoh was the mightiest, most important person, and he was able to get millions of people, or at least hundreds of thousands of people, to do things for him, and to build pyramids, of course, but also to, do the farming and give him the resources that they made, to do all of this. And in some cases, we're talking slavery here, but in other cases, there was other motivations, right? He said that basically, I am God, I see everything and I know everything, and I am above humanity, and so you need to do what I tell you, you need to do what I command you to do. And so, people, for the most part, I think, were very much like, okay, I guess we gotta build some pyramids, it sucks, but this guy's the pharaoh, we have to listen to him, right? And of course, if you disagreed with him, then you might face a wrath that you didn't want to, a violent wrath, you might be, killed. So there's another motivator. But we can see how all of the ideas circulating in ancient Egypt at the time, or the vast majority of them, there's always going to be contests, but the vast majority of them would be sort of in line with what the pharaoh says. And the pharaoh in this case, and the royalty, would be the ruling class, right? So the ruling class says, we're going to build some pyramids, we're going to collect crops from these areas, we're going to rule this, you're going to do what I say. And for the most part, people were like, okay, that's what we're doing. And so we can see the ideas of the ruling class being the ideas of the people, of everyone, really. So they're the ruling ideas as well. So not just the person is the ruler, but the person's ideas are the ruling ideas. And so think about the monarchy in England, for example, right? Especially historically. So if you think about that, it's very much updated, but it's also very much the ruling ideas of the ruling class are the same. So you can think about France and Louis XIV saying, like, I am the state. So if I say something, that means France says something. Or if I believe something, that means France believes it. And so, again, there might be people that are like, man, this guy's a dick, I don't want to do what he says. But then you might face really dire consequences. And for the most part, it helped, and it was helpful for you to just be like, okay, well, he's the king. He says we should do this, or we should go to war, or we should all partake in these activities. Better do it. And King of England has a wife that isn't producing sons for him. So, and the church says, you divorce, and so he just makes his own church, right? The Church of England. And we can see clearly here, like, the king wants something. He is told that he can't have it, and so he's like, no, we're not doing that. There's a new church now. So again, the idea that our ideas as the king or queen or pharaoh are everyone's ideas is predominant in those epochs, in those time periods. And then if you move a little bit further into the present, or closer to the present, we can see this in America as well. Although it's harder, because if it's working, if hegemony, which we'll talk about in a moment, and ideology work well, then you don't see this. And that's the whole point, is if you're in it and it's working, you think like the ruling class. So we can see this because the majority of people in America are relatively poor. And the privileges of most Americans are relatively low when compared to all the different strata, right? And yet people constantly vote against their own interests. It amazes me and it saddens me, and we won't get into all the details, but when you think about it, the vast majority of people in America see themselves as future millionaires or billionaires, and so they vote in favor of policies that help millionaires and billionaires, right? But most, if not all, of these people are not and never going to be millionaires and billionaires. In fact, the most likely way to become a millionaire or billionaire is? It's to have a dad or a family member, a close relation, who's also a millionaire or billionaire. It's very helpful. Yeah, if your parents are rich, you're likely to be rich in America. And so we can tell ourselves, like, we'll work hard and we'll become millionaires and billionaires, so we better make sure that it's a good place for millionaires and billionaires. But in reality, most people suffer, and they suffer in ways that don't make sense if they were interested in their own interests, right? They're actually interested in the ruling elite's interest, and that seems pretty clear on virtually any measure. But again, welcome to disagree. But if you think about America, especially the founders or the framers of the Constitution, for example, right? If you look at this image, there's a clear ruling class here, and it's apparent because there are there are no women in power. There are virtually no women being consulted in any way. There are no people of color. In fact, there are very specific rules saying that, yeah, we are all free. And think about what it says, right? If you think even just about the beginning of the Constitution, we the people, right? We the people seems to mean everyone. Unless you're black or gay or female or a non-property owning male. And, there's so much that we the people is actually we the rich white guys who own everything, including slaves at this time. That's what we the people mean. And so you're encouraged to see it as a universal, like everyone in America. But really, the Constitution and all of these things, at that time in particular, was really only designed for a certain elite group. So again, the ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. This is something that Marx and Engels were concerned with because what they saw was how easy it is to manipulate people when they think that everything is sort of the same, or they see the world in the same way as the ruling people. Because obviously it works for one group and not the other, and it's very one-sided. So if you are a ruling elite, it's very helpful if people see you as the same as them, because then they want your success and you want your success, great. If people see you as different, like this guy hasn't really worked very hard, he hasn't really done anything, he doesn't help us in any way. In fact, he just takes money from us every year and he takes whatever it is that we work towards. I really don't think that his interests and our interests are the same. That would be hard because then people rebel, right? That's what happened with the American Revolution, is that the English monarchy said, like, yeah, we own all of North America, you need to pay us taxes. And the Americans at that time were saying, you don't help us in any way, screw it, we're not paying you taxes anymore. No taxation without representation, right? And so you can see that was bad because the ruling elite, the British in this case, and the Pilgrims didn't see eye to eye, and so that changed. But now we can think about a number of situations, like who are most likely to, again, benefit from the ideas and the way that society is organized. It's the elite in our society today. And you might not like that, and you might resist that, but I encourage you to show me where I'm wrong in that, right? Like the elite who have lots of money, who have lots of wealth in other ways, meaning, property, connections, vast amounts of lawyers, accountants, and all of that, can live very great lives, while the vast amount of people in poverty can't afford basic good food, education, and housing, let alone lavish lifestyles or anything of that nature, right? And you can always say, well, if you work hard enough, you'll be a billionaire too, right? But think about it. In order for a billionaire to stay a billionaire, he just has to put money in the bank. And he has to just make sure that he doesn't have to pay too much taxes. And the interest alone lets him continue to live that lifestyle from baby to old man. A poor person who is born often into debt is not likely to be able to afford virtually any of the perks that would allow you to progress up the social ladder, right? If you're really poor, you're probably going to a shitty school. If you're going to a shitty school, you're probably going to a shitty university, if at all. Most people don't get that far if they don't have those resources. You're probably not feeling good because you can't see a doctor. You're not able to get the resources you need in terms of healthcare. You're probably not able to understand a lot of the things that are going on in terms of the big picture, because it's not like you're hanging out with senators or people who are making big decisions, right? You're hanging out around with other people who are likely to go one of two directions. They either fall in line and say like, well, I guess I just got to work hard at Walmart and this is what I'm going to be doing, or they challenge the system, and in most cases they'll end up in jail or something, right? And that can seem really pessimistic, and obviously that's not the case for everybody, but that's one of the ways in which we can see how this ideology works, right? So the ideology is that, let's just say ideology means ideas, right? Shared ideas, except in this case, ideology is usually not a conscious idea. So I could be like, I'm a Republican, or I'm a Democrat, and I believe that we should have access to this, or I believe that we should not be taxed, or we should be taxed as little as possible, whatever the case, right? These are ideas. Ideology is the underlying reasons why you might think that. And so that's where, if you're going to control people, and not control like a puppet master, but control like you want people to continue working for your interests. So if you want to have that, ideally you just tell people like, yeah, I'm the Pharaoh, I'm God, he told me that you need to make pyramids for me, sorry, that's how it is. And if you can get people to go along with that, great. It didn't work, or I don't think that would work exactly for Americans today. And if somebody said, hey, I'm the Pharaoh, you need to make me a pyramid, you'd probably tell them to fuck off. In which case, that shows that the ideology doesn't fit there. But everyone has an ideology. You have reasons for thinking things and for believing things. And while ideology can change a little bit, especially if someone points it out, right? If somebody says, I'm all powerful, and then you say, okay, well, show me some of your power, and then they can't, then you might not believe them, and then you might have a conscious reason to resist the underlying premise. Like, you're not going to do all this stuff for the Pharaoh if the Pharaoh says he has all these magical powers and he can't produce any of them, or you have reason to challenge it, like the Americans challenging taxation during the Revolutionary War, right? So anyway, that's one of the ways that the world is organized, or that Marx and Engels argue the world is organized. A lot of the time, what has happened where people try to resist that is they become ideological in a new way, right? So we can think about North Korea, which, a lot of people who hate the ideas of Marx or communism will be like, do you want to live in North Korea? Do you want to live in Castro's Cuba? Or do you want to live in Mao's China? And these are all places that maybe have been inspired by Marx to a certain extent, but definitely went and just made their new ideologies. So there's a difference between what people have done, like the USSR and Russia. Like, they may have said that we read Marx and we want to do this, but if you actually read like the readings that we have this week, you'll see that it doesn't say anything about gulags, it doesn't say anything about one-child policy or any of this kind of stuff, right? In fact, one of the main arguments is that capitalism takes away people's autonomy. It takes away their ability to do things for themselves, right? And it's based on money. So if you have lots of money, you can do anything you want. If you have no money, you can't do anything. It's not a free exchange. So the argument is that, if you are a billionaire and you want to make a big company, you can. And if you don't want to do that, then you can work for the big company, right? But it's not like people are like, I think I'll be a billionaire and make a big company, right? A lot of people can't afford any of that stuff, so they have to they actually sell their bodies when you think about it, right? They sell their labor power. So you're actually saying, look, for the next 8 hours or 10 hours, I'll do my mind and my body, it will do what you want me to do instead of what I would want to do. And so Marx and Engels are interested in how you might be able to make the most out of your time. So in other words, you don't have to sell your time and your thoughts to other people. In order for them to cash in on it, you should be able to cash in to the greatest extent possible. And again, nowhere am I asking you to convert to Marxism or communism, but I also don't want you to dismiss these readings as like, oh, he's a bad guy, don't listen to him. I want you to think about what the actual words are and think about what they mean, what they might look like when you implement them according to these, not according to sort of historical strange policies, oftentimes by corrupt dictators. Marx and Engels don't say anything about how we need corrupt dictators. And anyway, there's so much to get into. Like Freud and like a lot of the people we study, you could look at this stuff for your entire life and still heavily debate a lot of the ideas and what they mean. But I think it's important that we try to understand where they're coming from and what their arguments imply, and how we might better understand the world around us. That's what this is for. And how pop culture, that's the last thing I'll say, is that pop culture does a great job, as you'll see in some of these other videos, making people fall in line with ideology, right? So you could think about your social situation and protest a lot of the things that are unjust, or you could go to a movie theater, or you could rent a movie, or watch Netflix and stuff, and enjoy yourself, relax, play a video game. And a lot of people, I think, like Marx and Engels, even though that stuff wasn't there, video games weren't there, they could easily see it as an opiate for the masses, right? As a way of distracting people from their actual conditions and making them imagine that they're a celebrity by watching a film for 2 hours, or watching a reality show where people live amazing lives, allowing people who don't live such amazing lives to just, vicariously live through that, all the while fitting into a system that helps a few elite people as opposed to the majority of people, which is always what they say. Almost inevitably, someone who wants to control people will say, like, I'm one of you. If you let me be president, king, pharaoh, whatever, then this will be best for all of us. We are all Egyptian. We are all English. We are all American. And then you actually start to unpack that and you realize, okay, well, some people are a little more American than others. Some people are a little more British than others. And ultimately, you have the ruling ideas and the ruling elite kind of melting down or flowing down into the ideas of everyone so that they think the same way as the elite, but they don't benefit from the elite ideas. And that process, as Gramsci talks about, is hegemonic or hegemony. The idea of somebody kind of, again, it's a complicated notion, but the idea that somebody is above, and rather than say, hey, follow me and agree with me or I'll kill you, which is kind of like the old school way of doing things historically, instead it's, don't you want to be a good American? Don't you want to be a good British subject? And so you're actually choosing subjugation, you're consenting to your subjugation instead of challenging it, not because you're scared that the army will get you, but because you just think that that's the way things should be, right? Like, obviously this guy should be in charge and he's the best, and either a magical entity put him there or, his talent put him there, which is lovely if you're that guy, but most of the time it wasn't magic or talent, it was being an elite, starting off as an elite. And anyway, so much to talk about. I hope you enjoy some of the activities. They're meant to get you thinking, not to ideologically convert you. But if you're scared of this, just even reading Marx, which I find some students are, I think you should really think about ideology, right? Like, what ideologically makes you scared? If he is a bad guy and a stupid guy, then reading bad, stupid stuff shouldn't convert you to bad, stupid stuff, right? I don't think that that's the case, but there is a notion that fits in with that, and I think it's because there are, very real reasons why people would like people not to read this, would like people not to think for themselves, and that goes back to the whole idea, right? So interesting, perhaps troubling. If you want to do an experiment and tell your family you're a Marxist now, please do so and let me know how it goes. But just don't forget the last part, which is when you tell them that it's an experiment, your teacher didn't actually convert you to Marxism, because if I die after this, I'm going to have to stop doing this experiment. Anyway, enjoy yourselves. Talk to you soon.